right, we'll call the meeting to order at 6:35. We are here at the Freeport Town Council meeting number 04-22 on Tuesday, February 15th, 2022. Start with a roll call for Councilor Pillsbury.
Present.
Councilor Fournier.
Here.
Councilor Lawrence.
Here.
Councilor Bradley.
Here.
Vice Chair Egan.
Here.
And Chair Pilch is here. Councilor Daniele is excused tonight. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Our second order of business is to waive the reading of the minutes of meeting number 03-22 held on February 1st, 2022, and to accept the minutes as printed as given to us by our new council secretary, Ms. Wolf. Councilor Lawrence.
I do have to make one change. I don't have the page. It was part, it's the one, two, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 from the bottom where we're talking about, kind of towards the end of me, we're talking about fossil fuels. The comment I was trying to make was, and I've already talked to Christine about it, but commented that 40 years ago when I was a kid, we were told that we would be running out of oil in 30 years. We are still being told that we're going to run out of oil in 30 years, and this is from the experts. Yep. That's not what it says, but that's what I was trying to get across.
Do you have proposed language that you gave Christine?
Yes, I did, and it's very similar to what I just said, right?
Yes, I have it all in the minutes, what he wanted it to say.
Okay. Do you want to just read out what it says now?
Yes, hold on, I'm supposed to get a mic. That paragraph will now read, Councilor Lawrence commented that 40 years ago when he was a kid, we were told that oil would run out in 30 years, and this problem was going to be taking care of itself. We are still told that we are running out in 30 years, and this is from the experts.
Thank you. I suppose we should get a second on the amendment that Councilor Lawrence offered and vote on that. Any questions, debate, discussion? All in favor of the, sorry, it's Ed Bradley. All in favor of the amendment to the minutes?
Aye.
Opposed? And any other discussion on the minutes other than that change? All right.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes as amended.
Thank you, Councilor Lawrence. Thank you for the second, Councilor Fournier. All in favor of accepting the minutes?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the minutes are unanimously accepted. Thank you. The third order of business is some announcements that I have to read. First, the town's Public Works Department will be posting roads effective March 28th. March 28th?
February 28th.
I thought February 28th. A posted road guide is available on the Public Works page of the town website. Second, the main DOT bridge work will begin at exit 20 Desert Road with equipment mobilization in early March and construction, demolition, and earthwork starting in mid-March. Both bridges will be worked on simultaneously with exit 20 starting first in March 2022. Exit 22 demolition will start in late 2022. Exit 22 construction will commence in early 2023. The contractor's goal is to complete both bridges by late 2024 to early 2025 as work permits. The project scheduled completion date is November 1, 2025. Updates for major work items will be provided on the town's website through social media, Maine DOT's project website, and the Portland Press Herald. The AARP Foundation has a tax aid program. If you visit their website near the end of January, you should find the site locator tool where you enter a zip code and find locations nearest you for in-person tax preparation. That website is aarp.org. And lastly, short-term residential rental registrations expire March 1st of each year. Renewals that have made no changes to the property during the licensing year will only need to resubmit the 2-page application, an updated insurance policy or proof of coverage, and the $100 fee per rental. That's all the announcements I have. Do any other counselors have any announcements about upcoming notices or events? Seeing none, I'll move on to our fourth order of business, which is information exchange. When counselors have an opportunity to share information with the rest of us in the public about anything going on from their boards and committees or otherwise. Counselor Lawrence.
We have Greg Michaud from the Complete Streets Committee, and he wants to give us an update on what Complete Streets are doing.
Perfect. Thank you.
Take it away, Greg.
Hi, everybody. I think I know many of you, and there's some new faces here. My name is Greg Michaud. I live on 10 Penny Street in Freeport, and I'm the committee chair for Complete Streets. And Complete Streets is a committee that reports to and makes recommendations to the council for a variety of things, including the streets themselves, the sidewalks, the trails in town, crosswalks, lighting, anything to do with the, modes of transportation and the means to use them. The Complete Streets Committee is responsible for providing recommendations to this group. And we had a couple of weeks ago, I think we had a couple of representatives come and talk about the new grant proposal that was approved, and we got a multi-use trail that we're going to be able to put on Mallet Drive, and that's very exciting. And in the last week, we attended, many of us, the Freeport design meetings. There were probably up to maybe 4 or 5 of us that went to multiple meetings, and we walked away very, very excited. We were really chomping at the bit to figure out what we could do to kind of help with that process. So our committee met last Tuesday, and we spent about 20 minutes discussing the outcomes of many of those breakout sessions. And we felt it was important to provide, a point of view in many of these areas to sort of help facilitate that visioning. So this morning we met for 90 minutes, and we are starting to provide some sort of global recommendations in multiple areas, including things like the boulevard idea on Mallet Drive and Lower Main Street, parking on Main Street, integrated transportation system, power lines on Main Street, signage, and on and on. We have about 20 items. We had a spirited discussion this morning. It took us 90 minutes to get through maybe 4 of the items. But just wanted to give you a preview that's coming. Our input is coming for that. And also to let you know that we're going to be having a workshop with all of you, I think in 3 or 4 weeks. That's something that's done annually, and you'll get to know more about what Complete Streets does. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Greg.
Yeah, thank you. Counselor Bradley, you had something to share.
Yeah, just another short update on Island Rover. Adam and I have both reached out to what I'll call experts in somewhat different areas to review the launch plans, gotten some feedback, had some questions asked, and we're going to develop a little more information, get it to the Island Rover launch proposers. And again, I told you it would probably be 1 or 2 meetings. It might now be another meeting beyond that because of the response we've got. But we feel good that we're using due diligence to get closer to an understanding of what the issues might be, and so we can make a recommendation up or down to you guys when we get through the process.
Awesome. Thank you, Counselor Bradley, for the update and for all the work you're doing on that. Any other counselors? Counselor Egan.
I just want to point out, in case people aren't aware of the Complete Streets Committee, that the town engineer, Adam Bliss, staffs that committee. So we have a direct channel for public works or public capital improvements that might be proposed through that committee to come through the engineer, which I think is an excellent channel for for the manager to hear about those things, as well as the committee hearing about them from Greg. So thanks for that. Speaking of public works, I just want to highlight the fabulous work that I feel the public works team has been doing with the crazy weather we've been having with rain and then ice and clearing walkways and particularly sidewalks to make them passable and safe. So thanks to Superintendent Gibson and his team for doing an excellent job on that. And I had an inquiry from a constituent about an ordinance committee item from last fall concerning lighting and what our ordinance has for lighting. So I just wanted to know when our next ordinance committee is, and I'll just.
Next week.
Next week?
Week after next.
We've said it this morning, so I think it's the 7th.
March 2nd, I think it is.
Okay.
Yeah, we just said it.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
2 weeks.
All right. Just-
Yeah, I think it's the 2nd, March 2nd, that Wednesday, I think.
Okay,
is when we
great.
said it.
2 Wednesdays from tomorrow.
So I'll follow up then with committee members
Yeah.
on that particular item, so.
Perfect.
Great,
Yep.
thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Fournier.
I had a citizen approach me over the weekend to see if the town website could have the addition of when our terms are up on the council. So I went in Monday to ask Christine if that could be done. It was done Tuesday. I've already got 3 emails thanking for the quick response. So thank you to the town staff for addressing a citizen's need and being very prompt with it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Is someone going to talk about the end of design week and what's coming up?
Yep.
Okay.
Anything else before we launch into our sort of now traditional design week update or design process update? Fantastic. So Mary, you should be on deck here. We had our downtown design week was a week and a half ago, and it was fabulous. February 3rd through the 7th. There was an opening workshop, 7 topic sessions on various different topics, a closing presentation by Russ from the principal group, which was really inspiring. For those of you that couldn't make it, that's what I would suggest is go and watch that 1-hour presentation, that closing presentation, which kind of sums up a lot of what the weekend was about. And he's got some work ahead of him with the rest of his team. I'll let Mary kind of give an update on where that stands.
Well, hello, Mary Davis, and I'm sure that I hope you're not sick of seeing me, because there's going to be a lot more of me as we go in to get our whole design week completed. But I think I would say, and I did not set Greg up to talk about how excited they were to be there, but I think that is how so many people walked away. The principal was very pleased with the participation in each of the sessions. Remember this calendar that we showed you? In each of the sessions, we had between 40 and 60 people who came. And I think for those of you who were there, they were very interactive sessions. People had a lot to say. They came prepared to talk about the topics. Although I think we were all sort of worried that in an hour we wouldn't get a lot discussed, and we did. So pleased with all the participation and the ideas that came out. And I think for me personally, what I would share is that to be in town hall and to watch this incredibly talented team take our ideas and then turn them into sketches and drawings and concepts and financial analysis that we could see was incredibly exciting and interesting. And as so many people said to me at the outcomes, it seems like these things are doable. It seems like people listen to me, and I'm really excited about the next steps. So the power of the community was certainly felt over that weekend, even on like a terrible, snowy, awful day. And we had lots of people on Zoom. So just a truly fabulous weekend. I want to take a little bit of time just to say thank you. Thank you to the principal team. Their 7 participants here were fabulous and literally spent like 5 days from morning till night in that workroom with outputs of work, which you can see in the hallways. Thank you to the high school and the town staff for hosting and cleaning up after us, because there was a lot of things that went on there. Thank you to Caroline Pelletier and Celia, who did so much work to help us prepare for this, and lots of heavy lifting all the way across. And of course, thank you to all of the community members who participated in this. It not only for the sessions that were on Zoom, the opening and closing, but also a lot of people came into the workshops that were in town hall. And it was just so nice to be able to talk to people about our concepts and ideas and where we go from here. So very exciting weekend. I'd encourage all of you to go onto the website, and you can see all the recordings of all the sessions if you weren't able to attend, or stop by town hall and look at all the maps and all the drawings and renderings that are up, because there's still plenty of time to put in information and your feedback if you'd like. You can fill out an exit survey, or you can also send an email to any of us who were chairing this, which again, as a reminder, was Caroline Pelletier, Dan Pilch, Tawny Whitney, Chip Gray, and Alex Introvisato. Next steps are, we'll have a public open house on April 9th at the town hall, where you'll see another draft presentation of the outcomes. So now we're taking it from our ideas to our drawings to actually how we get it done. And then in May, we'll have a council workshop. So super excited. Very happy to see this coming into things that we can see that we can get done. And there were a few of you who were there for all the sessions. So happy to have you there. You can speak up too, because you were there to see it.
Councilor Bradley.
Hi, Mary. Great job. Great design week. I echo what you said. I thought there was some session in March.
There is. I was just going to mention there's a handful of project meetings, but there's a public open house that's currently scheduled for April 9th, which is a Saturday, when the principal group is kind of ingesting all of the information they learned over design week and will draft a plan. And that's when they're going to present their draft plan for the public, much like they did at the open house here. So the idea is we're going to have that on the lawn at Town Hall. The weather cooperates, try and, maybe have a barbecue, serve some lunch, make it a little bit fun. Have people interact, look at the plans, give some feedback. So for those of you who have been participating, thank you, but there's more work. So please show up on April 9th and continue to give us your input, which has been great. The council has some more opportunities for us to kind of quiz the principal group, and as they said earlier, bring out our pitchforks and things like that. And then the end of the project is scheduled for May 3rd, when the principal group will be giving what we hope is their final presentation to the council. But we'll have a few opportunities to talk to them before then. But the public open house is April 9th.
And again, I thought I heard a March date.
So right now, there's a council workshop scheduled, I think it's for March 29th, and a second council workshop scheduled for April 12th. We're kind of ironing out the details on those, but that's the way it stands currently. And that'll be our council opportunity to kind of preview the plan and then react to the open house.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Mary.
And let me say one other thing. I think as you heard from Greg, it was wonderful to have the complete streets there. He got the entire group on a Zoom call with principal. And so I would encourage, like any of you as groups who want more input into this, please continue to do that. It was fabulous having Greg and his team there. Because of course, as we go into implementation, what is it? Many hands make a big job small. This is going to be a community who gets this done. So awesome to see folks like Complete Streets involved. Keep there.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you.
Can I ask
Everybody
one?
else who's
Can I ask-
involved? Yes, Councilor Bradley?
I think it's fantastic. Complete Streets did what they did on their own initiative. That's the kind of input that's going to fill in the holes. My question is, has anybody on the team given thought to other groups that ought to be encouraged to do the same thing, so that we don't just sort of wait for those who are sort of, because I didn't know till today, and I've been watching this exactly how it was going to play out. It's actually going to play out a year earlier than I thought it was going to play out, and that was a surprise. So there may be others too. So is there an agenda or a list of organizations in town that we would hope would do just what Complete Streets did? Go through it from their point of view, look at all the opportunities, yes, no, here's something else we thought about, so that we get it all in the time frame you're looking at.
Yep. Mary, do you want to take that one, or you want me to handle that?
Sure, I think we can do it and combine. Certainly in the process before we came to Design Week, we met with individual groups. Caroline helped to pull that together. So we met with individual groups before that to give them an idea of where we were going and what we were doing. And I think now as we go into the next phases of it, we can certainly follow up with those groups again to say, what have you thought? What have you seen? What did you come up with? Because of course there's the climate action group. There's so many different groups that Freeport has. And we brought them involved earlier, and we want them involved as we go toward this April 9th. So perhaps we need something more formalized to do that. But we would love to have input. Caroline, do you want to add anything, or Dan, do you want to add anything?
I would just add that we really want to encourage anyone that participated in Design Week to fill out the exit survey. That is a very quick way for you to identify on your own the top 3 things that you like and the 3 ideas that you need improvement. So would encourage all of our community members, especially boards and committees that participated, to work on that right now so we can incorporate those into the plan. And again, we're trying to get those final exit surveys by the 21st, either online or give us a call or come by town hall and we'll print copies for anyone.
Well, okay, I'll say it. I think that as the end part of this process, we ought to extend direct invitations to groups to do what Complete Streets did, so that at the end of the day, if they don't do it, it's not our fault, it's their fault. And they've got the opportunity. We want it, desperately want the information. This isn't sort of a formal, please, say what you want to say. Council asks you, help us. And I don't know who all the groups should be. You may know who they all are. But let's do it and make sure we get it. And it's not just catch as catch can.
So we do have, in addition to the project team that kind of, I think I'll borrow your phrase, carries water to keep the project going. There are about 12 or so community connectors that we identified early on who can help us reach out to different groups. So there were some that reached out to different boards and committees in town, some that reached out to the school board and the school community. And we leverage them when there's time for input. So I expect we'll be doing that again, reaching out to those community connectors who do have sort of specific groups to reach out to. I know on our short list in the future is the planning board, the project review board, because as we move into implementation, that's going to be pretty key. And then as we, as a council, kind of hear more from things, we can certainly reach out in our roles to anybody that we think we missed. But I'm happy to get you that list of community connectors and the groups that they've been reaching out to in the past.
And I would also say at the different meetings, we had lots of participation from boards and community members. So certainly, to your point, Councilor Bradley, in reaching back out to groups, I think we'd be able to look at the attendees that were in the meetings and reach out to them and say, please pull your groups into it. So we'll work that.
Any other questions about downtown design progress? All right, moving on. Speaking of other groups that are involved that we want to keep appraised of what's going on downtown, the sewer district is having a meeting on the 23rd, which is next week. And on the agenda is some information from an engineer that they've hired to advise them on the infrastructure needs going forward. I think there's some big works in progress. So, that meeting's open to the public. The link should be on the town calendar if it's not already. That's the sewer district on the 23rd. And lastly, while Mary's still on the call here, FEDC has been in the process of identifying a new executive director to replace the one that we lost, and they think they've got it narrowed down to a candidate. They're going to be reaching out and kind of finalizing that, but as part of that, there's probably going to be a request for an increase in the budget to pay for the new candidate. So I don't know what the number is, but the timing is such that they would like to have that new executive director in place soon, even though we're not going to vote on the budget for another month or two. So I bring it up tonight just to kind of get either some nods or some shakes of the head to say, are we comfortable that they're going to go out and do that, knowing that it might come back to us for a budget increase. So what we don't want to happen, we don't want to have them go out and offer a job to a guy knowing that if there's a consensus up here that we say, hell no, we don't want to increase the budget at all, now would be a good time to say that, even though we're not at the point where we're voting on the whole budget. And there's certainly opportunity to reach out to anybody in the FEDC board for more details about the candidate or the potential budget increase and things like that. Questions? Councilor Bradley.
Yeah, it's hard to nod or not nod without having any idea what the number is. So FEDC is paid for essentially out of the downtown destination TIF, and we have an idea of what that is. We know what Keith was making, so somewhere in the middle, I assume there is a point at which the offer is being made. Can you share the rough offer number?
I don't know what the status is of the offer. I mean, just.
So I might be revealing something that shouldn't be revealed.
Yeah, I don't know if they've kind of finalized that, but, I'm guessing it's probably not double what the previous number was, and it's probably more than a nominal increase. But like I said, you're certainly welcome to talk to Mary or anybody else on the board to get further details before committing to anything. But I just wanted to put it out there. So if anybody does have concerns, either speak now or I encourage you to speak to someone at FEDC in the next few weeks.
Okay.
Councilor Pillsbury.
So we need, within the next 2 weeks, is that?
The sooner the better. I think they're anxious to make the offer, finalize the offer, and get the guy onboarded. So especially if you think you have reservations, sooner the better.
And may I add?
Of course, please.
The candidate that we have literally watched all of the downtown visioning workshops, and what he is saying to us is that he said, I would like to be on in plenty of advance time for the workshops that you're doing, because I think such a big portion of this work is going to continue to be spirited by FEDC, which we certainly agree with. And so earlier is better. And let me also say, as a plea to you, although I've loved playing this role for the last nearly 4 months, I would like to go back to my other career. And I would love to have, this is a very qualified candidate. We had 37 applicants, of which we interviewed 6 incredibly qualified candidates, brought 2 finalists forward. We had some fabulous folks. And so I have a very good feeling about what the salary range should be and what we're offering this candidate. And this candidate was not, was kind of in the middle of expense range, but has fabulous qualifications. So, and I have interviewed many people in my life, and I've never had 100% of the interviewing team make the recommendation to hire one candidate, which happened in this case. So I am very pleased with this process.
With the position being vacant for 4 months, I'm assuming there are some additional funds that were left over in that particular budget. So if those funds are available, I'd be interested to see what the shortfall is, because I think it would give us more wiggle room moving forward. And those funds have already been allocated for expenditure up to June, so that might be an option.
Yeah, so I'll offer 2 comments and Mary can add to it. We can certainly have a discussion about the funds to date and how they've been spent and what they're going to spend on through the rest of the fiscal year, which ends at the end of June. My concern is more going forward. If we hire this guy for next year and the years to follow, are we going to have the budget to support that position going forward? But yeah, no, it's a valid concern. And just to drive the point home, I think it's obvious, but it's probably worth saying out loud that as president of the board of FEDC, the board is all volunteer. Mary herself is a volunteer, so she's been doing the job for I don't know how many months, but really going above and beyond what the job is. This downtown project has been quite the lift. So she's done a phenomenal job for $0, which is admirable. But we'll certainly have time to discuss the budget. Thank you, Mary. Yes, Council Pillsbury.
Just another quick question. Were we just under market with the previous executive director?
Significantly so. When I talked, because literally, again, of these 37 candidates, I talked live with perhaps 12 to 15 of them. And yes, we were significantly under market. As can happen in this day of market pressures. And so in the candidates that we looked at, in the 6 finalists that we looked at 3 candidates who were, and again, I don't know if I should be talking about money here or not. Dan, you have to give me that clarity. But we looked at 6 candidates who ranged from at the lowest of the market value to highest of market value. And we chose kind of a candidate in the center. But yes, we were significantly off.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Where did we pull the data as to, where the market sits now? Just curious what metrics we're looking at. Like, are we comparing peer-sized towns? Are we, where do we draw that data from?
Yeah.
The data was drawn from looking at postings that were currently put for comparable towns. Also looking at national postings that were put up, and talking with candidates. Sorry, did that stop? And in asking candidates for salaries and where they sat now. We also have other board members who had knowledge into it, and it all.
The room audio down, right?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, was there a question in the echoing? I couldn't understand it.
No, I think we've got too much room audio, is what I heard coming from the control room. So sorry about that, Mary. Why don't you keep going?
Okay. The market information was come from current postings, candidates, and just the market analysis of looking at the market right now and the experience levels that we wanted. Again, we did not go with the most expensive candidate, but also it's because we thought that the candidate that was in the center of the crowd was the best candidate for us as well. So it worked out in all ways, shapes, and form.
That you've done. I just wanted to have some clarification. That was all. Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. And one thing that I would say in my years of managing human resources for IDEX, this market is very unusual in that salaries, because the market is tight, salary surveys that are older don't necessarily work in looking at current salaries. So you have to look at the salary surveys, but also look at the current marketplace. And that's what I tried to do. I wanted to get the best value for Freeport.
June 1st on. However, I also know there's a number of other positions that are going to be coming forward. So we are going to have to make some tough decisions. And I don't mind making those tough decisions, but I think this is an important position to have for this town to prosper in the future. So I'd be, very interested to see where that's at.
Yep. Good points. It's going to be an interesting budget year for sure. There's a lot of new positions in the works. But I encourage any of you that have an interest in what FEDC does to talk to Mary or any of the board members if you want. They'll be, I think, more than candid with the candidate and what they've done and where they're going, and get a chance to meet them if you want to do that before. So
thank you. Please do reach out. Again, there were 7 of my board members who were involved in the interviewing process, and I did meet with my board earlier today. So reach out to me or any of those folks to further discuss. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary, once again for everything. Okay, moving on, one last item in information exchange before we move on. It's an item that's not on the agenda, but it's probably worth highlighting that it's not on the agenda. On January 18th, I think it was, we had a mask mandate that went into effect. and it was in effect for about a month unless we renewed it. So it's due to expire tomorrow. If we were going to renew it, it would have been on tonight's agenda. It's not on tonight's agenda, which means that we don't intend to renew it. So we'll let it lapse tomorrow, rather. So after tomorrow, there will be no more mask mandate in Freeport. If you choose to wear a mask, you of course can still do so. If you have a business and you want to require masks in your private business, of course you can still do that. Town hall and other public buildings separately have a policy that requires masks in those spaces. So if you come into town hall, you'll still need a mask. I believe the same is for the library and the public work. Well, not many people go to the public works building, but
We're actually right in the middle of reevaluating it by pulling employees, so I don't want to announce that we do or don't have one, because that might change very quickly here. I see Chris nodding her head too, because I think she might have been involved in conversations I didn't know about, so, yeah.
So stay tuned for that. But townwide, the mask mandate that we have townwide is going to expire tomorrow. We do not have any say in what goes on in the schools. They're managed separately by the school board. So we don't have anything to say about whether masks are required or not in the schools. So I'll just put that out there. There'll be time for some public comment in 2 agenda items, but I just wanted to announce that. Councilor Pillsbury.
I just want to make a comment that I know that this wasn't unanimous. There wasn't 100% support within the town, but I appreciate everyone doing their best to follow the mandate. Even if it wasn't exactly the way you wanted it, I'm proud of our town for doing the right thing and supporting, everyone helping each other. So just wanted to say that and appreciate everyone's viewpoints and thoughts on this, but really appreciate everyone doing their part. Thank you.
Well said. Any other comments before we move on? Nope. Seeing none, we will move on to our 5th order of business, which is the town manager's report.
All right, Mr. Chair, thank you very much. I do want to give a brief update about what happened at the end of last week here at the town hall. Most, I think, on the council are aware of that. Some of the public might have been. We did have to close the town hall late in the day on Wednesday and all the day on Thursday. A failing sump pump turned out not to be a sump pump and turned out to be a sewer blockage due to the service line out in the street that caused a problem. So if you look out behind the window, if you were to open these curtains right on the street underneath, you'd notice a giant excavated trench where they had to replace the service line down to the nearest sewer main. So not something we were thrilled about, but we really couldn't have people in the building. I think it was right underneath, right about where Chris and Councilor Pillsbury were seated. But we had a professional cleaning company come in and do decon. So everything is great down in the basement, including air scrubbing and filtration, all the good stuff. So thanks to the people in the public. A lot of people were severely inconvenienced who had things that they had to do on Thursday and weren't able to come in. So we apologize. That's not something that we would have done if there was really any option there. Road posting season is upon us. It's going to start on February 28th of this year. So that is in about 2 weeks exactly from today. Road postings continue from the date of posting until the subgrade warms up and dries out underneath the pavement. And heavy loads can still be allowed when roads are posted by permit, and that depends on the weather, the specific road in question. So if you have a heavy truck that needs to do a delivery, or if you're a driver for a company that does heavy deliveries, we can still arrange deliveries. Usually that's in the morning after when the temperatures are cold, when it's below freezing, or in a cold snap or something like that, where we can comfortably put weight over the roads. So we do try to work with anybody that needs deliveries. Please call the Public Works Department, 865-4461, if you think you need to work that through. Utility deliveries are not subject to posted roads, so things that are essential to, life, like heating oil and emergency service trucks and things like that. So it would only be heavy. Usually it has to do with building materials and things like that, so those contractors already know what that means, and I don't need to explain it any further. As a result of last week's workshop at the Coastal Waters Commission, you probably recall we had some conversation between the council and the commission about the ordinance proposal from last year. So we've actually started action back up on that again at the staff level. We met with the town attorney, and we have a meeting with the Coastal Waters Committee leadership later this week. We have been advised that that actually needs to go to the planning board because it is a shoreland zoning amendment, which by law requires input from the planning board, which is our municipal reviewing authority. So that'll take a trip to the planning board where all 800 plus shoreland property owners will get noticed before it comes back to you. So it'll generate plenty of public discussion, and any issues or, details that need to be ironed out will happen well in advance of it coming back here. So just letting everybody know that that is on a fast track to happen. We're pushing that right along.
What is it? What's the subject of the ordinance that's going to
This
the
was piers, docks, and wharves and headwaters.
ones that we have been, and we were going to take a walk and we aren't, or we are?
The site walk.
Are we still taking it?
You can. You absolutely can.
Okay, I'll go out.
And we can do that anytime before it comes back to the council too.
I thought they were organizing a site walk for us, or I don't know how that was going to happen. I thought we all
Yeah.
agreed we were going to go on a site walk.
I think everybody thought that we were gonna organize it, but nobody did, so I don't know who's to blame on that one, Ed.
It's not me.
Is there anybody who wants to do a site walk?
I would. I didn't understand the ordinance.
The language may change, as I understand it, based on the feedback we got from the attorney, and it may change again at the planning board, but it hopefully should be simpler to understand. But if anybody wants to do a site walk, I guess, can they just coordinate that with you, or?
We can meet with
directly
I think
Coastal Waters?
I would wanna do it with the Coastal Waters Commission, but I think we probably wanna wait and see, in a week or two because we're gonna have to meet with them and we're gonna have to put forward a proposal. The actual proposal is not gonna be a Coastal Waters recommendation to the council. It's gonna have to be a planning board recommendation because it's about shoreland zoning. So we probably wanna see the final form that it takes, either when it gets introduced to the planning board or when it makes it through the planning board, just so we know what exactly we're talking about. But I think that the site walk is still important, so you understand what they're talking about, yes.
Yep, it sounds like there's a handful of, I call them creeks or headwater areas that would likely be affected, so those would be the ones to focus on.
I think the things that we identified at the staff level on our call the other day, in addition to what the Coastal Waters Commission identified, are that our ordinance allows a 125-foot extension from the bank essentially over the wetland and over the mudflat into the water. So the biggest concern is really those extending both directions from either side without infringing on the other person across the bank's ability to put a wharf out. So you can do the math. If you can go 125 feet from either side, you could go over into your neighbor's land, or riparian water per our ordinance if you have more than 125 feet of riparian land. So that's kind of the dimensions that I think we're talking about. And the ones in question are much shallower than that. We're talking 10 to 20 foot width.
Right, and there was also a
Brooks.
question on how much water they needed at
Yep.
mid-tide.
So the original proposal had those two components, both the amount of time that there was water, based on the tide change, and then the actual width of the channel itself. So when that has a final form at the planning board, be glad to share it with the council even before it comes back to you. That might be a good time to,
Yeah, because then we know what we're looking for.
even with the planning board and the council possibly would be a good time, and the Coastal Waters Commission, so. But we're moving that along fast as we can for you, based on feedback at the last meeting, so. That's all I got, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Okay, we are now on to our sixth order of business, which is our public comment period. So thank you to the members of the public for coming and keeping us company, either in person or online. The public comment period is reserved for items that are not on our agenda. We have a pretty light agenda tonight, but if there is an item that's already on the agenda, hold your comments until we get to that item. If you want to talk about something that's not on the agenda, then you're welcome to do so. We'll give everybody 3 minutes to share their thoughts, opinions, comments, concerns. We'll start with the folks in the room, and then we'll see if there's anybody on Zoom who also wants to share something. So with that, anybody in the room want to step up? Mr. Arsenault. And step up to the mic, introduce yourself.
Yeah, Andrew Arsenal, Freeport. My question is, I think I heard it a couple of council meetings ago that there was going to be a discussion of what our portfolio is invested in as far as stocks and different bonds, and that Bangor Savings was actually doing the investment for us. And I'm treasurer down the Flying Point Cemetery, and last year all we got was veterans money. We did not get any perpetual care money because, if I remember the letter right, and I've lost it now from last year, but said there wasn't enough money to disperse from the funds to, if we did with the funds would continue. Now, I'm not an investor, but it seems like in the last 10 years the stock market's done pretty good. And I don't understand why, and my request is, before we get into some kind of what stocks we're invested in, what stocks we don't want to be invested in, that we need to really make a public viewing of what our portfolio is, who's managing it, and what our expectations are, and what a track record's been for our investor or our trustee. And as somebody that handles perpetual care money, I think we should be really looking at how we're investing those funds, because years ago this town lost $750,000 in our stock investments one year, and luckily we got it back. But these are perpetual care funds, and it costs us 10 mowings at $150 a mowing, and when we only get $450, and I know we don't have a lot in the perpetual care funds, but when we get none from the town, it makes a bit of a bite. And most of the people in our cemetery don't have any relatives left. There's a few new graves that people are donating for, but it's an older cemetery, like a lot of the older ones that just aren't relatives left around to donate. So I'd really like to see, before we go down some grading of what stocks, really to see sort of transparency, what we're involved in. I remember last time, years ago, I looked at the investment. The bank was Fleet Bank then. I showed it to a friend of mine who was an A.G. Edwards. I thought he was a pretty savvy guy. He told me it was Fleet stock. It was Columbia stock, which was Fleet Bank stock, and basically said it was uninsured and not well rated. And we were probably getting charged a lot of churning fees and weren't making much money. So I think, as you guys, I think the proper word might be fiduciary responsibility, that we really need to do the best we can. And maybe he told me he'd handled some cemetery trust funds, I think, for Turner and up that way, out of Lewiston office. He says he really was not allowed to invest in the things that Freeport was invested in. It was really, had to be insured and had to be really guaranteed, maybe like muni bonds or something that paid a pretty steady rate. So I would encourage us to be transparent and to really have a good discussion where this stuff goes, because it costs more and more every year to take care of these, and we want our cemeteries to look nice. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you. You want to address that, or you want me to do it?
Andy, as usual, you're prescient, ahead of the curve. We met this afternoon to talk about exactly that. A couple issues came up in the budget last year. A couple issues have come up during this year. And we're going to go through a review of our current investment decisions, our policies, and our returns, and we will make all those results transparent as soon as they're available to us.
I mean, we've got a lot of pretty savvy people in town. I'm sure there's some good investors in town, and maybe almost like an investment volunteer group that could, some of these guys. And
what we've decided to do, not that we can't change, is to put an RFP out to all banks interested in us and our $8 million worth of reserve funds, including cemetery and other funds. And take a look at what we're doing, make recommendations about our policies, and make some suggestions about the risk we're taking and the returns we're expecting, and see if we should make any changes or not, or whether we're okay where we are, and then look at fees and other things that these people charge and see if we could be in a better situation. It's been about 8 years since we did this, and I think, as Peter, very candidly said, the current policies were, sort of forged in the fires of the municipal default swaps and all of that. People were scared to death, so we are maybe more conservative than the current market justifies, and we'll take a look at all of that just as you asked us to do. So thank you very much.
that'd be great, Ed. And I hope you'll, somehow we can have a document that the public can read, and see
As
where
soon,
we're
as soon
going.
as we get something, it'll be,
Yeah, I'm
we'll,
just saying, at some
we'll
point, it'd be
present it
nice
up
if we
here.
could- So the public could look at what you're doing
Absolutely.
besides just calling you and bugging you. I mean, maybe we could have a little presentation and have somebody come in.
Absolutely. That's what the plan.
I'm glad you're on top of this, Ed.
Glad you're there to help me. It's just like the old days, Andy.
That's right. Except I think we fought more back then.
On that note, anybody else want to come up and share thoughts for a few minutes?
We do have an audience member.
Okay.
Hello, Dom Petrillo, live at 8 Upper Mast Landing Road. First, thanks so much for serving as town council members. I respect you all and each very much for your hard work and dedication. I'm happy to hear about the mask mandate expiring tomorrow, but I just wanted to bring up a couple of final thoughts that I had. I wonder if there's any thoughts for the council to consider a resolution to abstain from future medical mandates regarding private businesses, even public-facing private businesses. I think it would, in the absence of the mandates, the privately owned businesses and private residents would be allowed to make their own decisions based on their personal level of comfort. And I just think it might be a better, easier thing for people to accept if we let the state, through the direction of the CDC, hand out those guidances. They're the first with the information and the data, and probably the best suited to create even local ordinances. They'd have that data based upon the local areas. Secondly, and I'm probably going to run over time, I filed a FOIA request to obtain town emails between Midcoast Hospital regarding the pro-mask mandate PowerPoint presentation that was given the night the council voted in the mask mandate. And it indicated that there was one person who completes the FOIA request duties. I would also ask that the council maybe consider making some kind of resolution in the event of a FOIA request is made, that there's a 3-person team that completes and verifies the request. Furthermore, if one or more of the people on that 3-person team were to be material within the FOIA request, that they should recuse themselves as a conflict of interest, and a different person could replace them to complete the FOIA request. I think that would remove any conflict of interest in that particular request. And also, I wanted to ask a question and maybe get some clarity on this. It was my understanding on February 1st, there was a motion to reconsider the mask mandate. And maybe I misunderstood the language, but it was my interpretation of the language that we would be voting to reconsider the question initially asked, not to be voting on a new question of the inverse language or reverse language of the original question. I think that the code that was used was code 201, perhaps. And maybe I'm wrong, and I read it, and maybe I can get some clarification on the procedure used in the motion to reconsider and how that should work.
Do you want to, okay?
Yeah, the town charter specifies how emergency ordinances are passed and rescinded. So they have to be done according to that. Since this was passed as an emergency ordinance, it can only be rescinded according to that. There is no motion to reconsider in the town charter. It is a common Robert's rules, of order procedural thing. The council could decide to take that on a procedural item, but to pass a law, a local law, like a binding ordinance, it has to be according to the way that the charter lays it out.
Yeah, I think that my confusion comes from the language within the town council rules. The town council rules specify that the ordinance would be reconsidered. Isn't that correct?
I think it has to follow, sorry, I want to make sure I'm on. It has to follow in the charter, so the charter is the fundamental rules that we have to follow in procedure. The town council rules of order and procedure are just adopted by a majority vote of the council. It's their own internal bylaws. To pass something that's legally binding, it has to be according to the procedure that's laid out in the charter for an ordinance. That's an ordinance being any local law that has an enforcement provision in it.
Right, so there is no actual motion to reconsider then?
I think somebody mentioned it. I don't think there was a second.
I
Right.
made that motion to reconsider.
Right. So
And I also
So
think
there is no
was-
actual motion to reconsider within the council. It
Correct.
doesn't sound like there is, even though it specifies in the town council rules that you can have a motion to reconsider, it's still, that actual vote can't be reconsidered. It seems to me.
I don't think so. I think the charter specifies how an emergency ordinance can be rescinded specifically. So if the council adopts a rule later that says you can reconsider a vote, you still have to meet the standard in the charter that says how the law can be repealed.
Okay.
That's my opinion, but that's not a legal opinion.
Right, it's just my interpretation of the reading of the town council rules, that if you are to reconsider a vote, that you wouldn't reconsider the inverse of the vote. You wouldn't have that vote, you would reconsider the vote that happened and re-vote on that particular item. And I believe that Councilor Lawrence did make a motion to reconsider.
Did, and then we voted, and what we were told is we needed to, if you need if you need 5 to pass it, you need 5 to rescind it.
Understood, yeah.
I don't
So
know.
it's not, so it in fact just wasn't a motion to reconsider the mandate, no.
I didn't interpret it that way, but I don't know if there was a second on Council Lawrence's motion that was originally made.
What's the significance of the distinction, Don?
Well, the significance of the distinction is while I search for, I'm searching myself for an understanding of what it was that happened. Because it was my understanding that if we reconsidered the vote, then we would have a reconsideration of the vote, not that we would vote again on a different question.
I think I'll speak for myself, but I think what I was asked was whether I wanted to undo or rescind the ordinance that 5 of us had voted for about a month earlier, or a couple of weeks earlier. And I said no, and I think 3 others said no. They didn't have the 5 votes that the manager told us we needed to do that, so it stayed in effect. However you characterize that, I don't know. I mean, I'm not playing lawyer here on that, and I don't think anybody did that night, but I think we all knew what we were doing.
I would agree with that, Ed, and what I'm saying is that I think that it was incorrect. I think that a reconsideration of the vote and a 4-3 vote on the second round of it would have removed the mask mandate. I believe that that's a fact.
So if your legal interpretation is right, the 4 votes would have been enough to undo the mask mandate 2 weeks ago.
That's correct.
Okay, I don't know. That's certainly not what we understood that night.
I understand that. Okay. Well, I'll pass on further back and forth on that one. I don't want to waste anybody's time. All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Dom. Anybody else in the room want to speak? I think we've got one person pending on Zoom, but happy to take more comment from the public. Thanks.
Good evening, Nick Military of South Freeport Road. I want to affirm Mr. Petillo's comments, an end to mask mandates, an end to the vaccine mandates, and a rescindance of those that are already in place. Thank you for your time.
Thanks. Thanks for sharing your comments. Anybody else in the room? Or move on to Zoom? I think, do we still have somebody on Zoom? Looks like we've got one hand up. From
Joyce
Vayu. Joyce, welcome to the meeting.
Thank you for having the Zoom capability. I'd like to talk a little bit about our property tax program. Maine Council of Aging estimates that more than 1/3 of Mainers over the age of 65 depend on Social Security alone. And with the increased cost of food, healthcare, heating, etc., and property taxes, the average person is not able to survive. The state is working on what they consider to be part of the solution with the initiatives like LD 1622, which is an act that will promote individual retirement savings. They've also brought back the state property tax deferral program for those earning less than $40,000. And if you don't know, that's actually like a reverse mortgage program that the state has with state residents for payment of their property taxes. But many of us think that the word loan is a 4-letter word and we don't want that, or they want to be able to leave their property to a family member, not the state. Most people want to continue to help their community by paying taxes and want to stay in their homes, not be placed in a nursing home. I would like to see the town of Freeport take the lead on this issue and look at developing a program that would cap property tax levels at age 70. There would have to be several qualifiers like how long they've owned the property, was it the primary residence, income level, length of ownership, and make the program voluntary. Let's truly explore what something like this would mean for our seniors if they did not have to worry each year when the property bill comes, were they going to be able to stay in their homes? And let's honestly look at what this would cost the other property owners in town. Would it only be $5 extra, $10 extra per property bill, tax bill? Let's stop talking about helping our seniors and honestly look at what we as a community can do to help keep them in their homes as long as possible. And again, I'm not asking that we remove and give them zero property tax, but that at a certain age, we cap their tax and say it will no longer increase, but it could decrease if that ever could happen. So thank you.
Been following the stuff you mentioned at the state level and sort of looking into other states as well and looking for creative ways to do essentially what you were describing. And as you know, one of our former counselors, Melanie Sachs, is our state rep now, and she serves on the taxation committee, so she's a great contact for talking about programs like this. So I know for one, I'll mention it to Representative Sachs and see how feasible it is and what we need to do. But it's a great idea. Thanks, Joyce. Councilor Fournier.
Would it be possible to ask maybe the assessor to see if he could do a little research? Number one, if we can do it locally, not that I don't say the state does great work, but sometimes it takes a number of years to get some type of thing to be equal across the board, the north versus the south versus the east and west. So I'd like to see us maybe ask the assessor if he could take maybe this idea of age 70, maybe with 15 years residency, if that's something we could do legally, and take a hard look at it if possible. I think it's a great idea.
I'm guessing there's rules about what we can and can't do locally.
Tax exemptions have to be authorized by the state, so I'm not sure. There may be a program that allows those type of criteria to be used already. But we can't propose our own categories of tax exemption, so we could do some research to see if anything that Joyce suggested falls or comes close to any of those existing procedures. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Council Chair, but I think what you were getting at is if something needed to be suggested, a new proposal, right, for exemptions in the state, we would refer that to our local rep. Is that where you were going?
Yeah, and if that's where I was going, and if there's something that we can do and we need to advocate for it, that something we can consider and advocate for. But it's certainly, and Councilor Fournier, if there's stuff that you want to try and do locally.
There are several programs that have been passed in the past 2 legislative sessions that I'm not up to speed on, that I can do some research on as well with our new assessor and report back.
Yeah, and maybe we can ask Representative Sachs to if she's interested in coming to talk to us as well, because I know there are a couple of programs that have changed and some limits that have been increased, and I don't pretend like I can speak intelligently about them, so she may be a good person as well.
I like the suggestion, though, from Joyce that she just made.
Mm-hmm. Councilor Pillsbury.
I mean, is there a way for us to just get a little bit more data from the assessor in terms of demographics, see what we're looking at in the next few years, 5, 10, 15, so that we kind of know where we're headed with this? I mean, I think we all intuitively understand that, Maine is the oldest state in the nation. We have an aging population, but what it's really going to mean, and we can kind of crunch some numbers and see what the impacts might be to give us a little bit better understanding as we potentially look to advocate or do other initiatives. I mean, it would just help me wrap my head around it a little bit more.
One of the things, unfortunately, that we don't have are things like DOBs for date of birth for property tax parcels, even property owners. I see our town clerk shaking her head yes, because I think some of that is in voter records, but we can't use the voter records for those type of things legally. So some of our property database file has no demographic information on the owner because it shouldn't. I mean, from a legal standpoint. But we could maybe distill down what exists out there for just demographics and hope that it holds true between property owners and renters. That would be, my only concern is that it might be like assisted living or nursing homes might skew those numbers from property taxpayers to renters. But we can do the demographic research, just residents across town pretty easily, I think.
Wouldn't the census have some of that information?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking, yeah.
Have most of it.
And I don't know how far they've gotten down the 2020 census to the demographics or things like that, the ages, but we could look, yeah.
Did you want to say something, Counselor?
Yeah. I don't want to speak or interpret what Joyce was saying, but she indicated at the beginning of her comments about the limited income of a substantial portion of senior homeowners in Freeport, and so it's likely that the demographic that something like this might apply to would be people who are on fixed income and are not able to afford. Of course, everybody would like to have a cap on property taxes, but another way to look at it is to, rather than changing how we tax or creating complex exemption rules, is for the town to consider, and there's probably partners that we could work with, to establishing a property tax circuit breaker fund that a property owner who met certain criteria and was at a particular income level that we can interpret would be able to apply for some assistance in paying their property tax bill, to have the same net effect, to where the property taxes are not going to be an overly crazy burden on them on an annual basis, but that would be something that's a lot easier, I think, to put in place and implement than changing how we tax.
I do think there are fewer rules on expending taxpayer money that you're politically accountable for to benefit taxpayers as opposed to just wiping clean the tax debt, which is very limited.
And it may not necessarily even have to be capitalized with taxpayer money. I mean, it could very easily be something else.
In which case you have zero restriction probably on how you apply that, yes.
Just another way to look at it.
Yeah, good idea.
And while we're looking at this, maybe another thought would be, one of the things we had when I was living in New Jersey is taxes were so outrageous. My grandmother lived in the same house for 80 years. The taxes became so outrageous that none of us in our family could handle just paying the taxes, so we had to sell the place. And I was there for 18 years, and it was a very great place to live, but we were forced out just because of the taxes. So the point is, maybe we can also look at some way to prevent the people that made the town from having to move out.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's a bunch of good stuff for us to circle back on, getting data from the state on how it works and what the programs are, and then also investigating what local options are with circuit breaker programs and other stuff. Thank you, Joyce. I see Mr. Arsenault back.
Could I jump in on Joyce's issue?
Go for it.
Seems though we just got done, or we're continuing this design week. I think it'd be a great idea, and it's been brought up before. We're trying to rejuvenate our town. We need to make it a lot more business friendly. We need to relax some regulations. And we need to encourage more people to move to town and pay taxes and get businesses going here and fill our rents. And that will help everybody's taxes. And at the end of that, we need to learn how to really be tight with our budgets. So that's how we keep people in town too. So not just, and I think Joyce's, all the ideas are great, but that's one more, is we need to make sure our town doesn't fail. We need to make sure that businesses are easy to do business, easier to do business, and that's been talked about a lot, and I just wanted to reiterate that. So thank you.
Thank you. Once again, very timely comments, since we'll be talking about some of that later on tonight on our agenda, removing some regulations. Okay, any other public comment before we move on? Seeing none, we are now on to our 7th order of business, the meaty part of our agenda, which is to take action on the following items of business, as read by the council chair. And the first of those is item number 43-22, to consider action relative to adopting the February 15th, 2022 consent agenda. Councilor Pillsbury, would you read the be it ordered?
Absolutely. Be it ordered that the February 15th, 2022 consent agenda be adopted.
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Lawrence. So we have a consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda that anybody wants to discuss individually and to remove from the consent agenda? We have a few victular licenses, some donations, and one resignation from the Shellfish Commission.
I see that the 2 donations that we talked about the last meeting, did we get any clarity on what those funds are?
Yep, they were listed as to those funds as opposed to from those funds. So they're both $500 donations for Fire Rescue Department from those 2 funds, so.
So both are for the Fire Rescue Fund?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. They're still those groups, but they're coming to us, not through us to those groups, which should make, I hope, everybody a lot more comfortable.
Any other discussion on the consent agenda? All right, all in favor of adopting the consent agenda?
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous, thank you. All right, we have 3 items to discuss tonight, the first of which is item number 44-22 regarding the lease extension for the French school. Councilor Fournier, would you read the be it ordered and the be it further ordered?
Sure. Be it ordered that the long-term lease extension request from El Vico Frenzy du Maine for sole school property on South Freeport Road be approved. Be it further ordered that the town manager be authorized to sign lease documents and to make any non-substantive changes.
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Lawrence.
I have one actual substantive change before we start that needs to, I hope I told John and Dan this one was coming, but we had just the actual rent amount was from last year when this lease draft was drawn up. That's in those documents in front of you. It says 17,000 roughly even. The current lease amount this year is 17,825.04 per year. And that should match. That's what you actually paid, Willie. So that shouldn't be, I don't think, contentious. But that's the only substantive change. We did talk about a couple things. We discussed this once before with three times before with the council, but once recently. There were a few changes that were requested by the council. One was reduction from 4 guaranteed 20-year renewals to a 20-year term and 1 20-year renewal with negotiation good faith following the 20-year renewal term for future terms. So that's the substantive change I think that came from the last time we talked about this. So I think the school is ready to go.
Do we have a document?
Yep.
You?
Do you need a printout?
I think he's got one. So is this amount here correct? $17,305?
It's not. That should be. That's what should be $17,825.
$17,825.
And 4 cents.
And 4 cents.
Which was the actual rent, because that was escalated this year.
Yep.
Chris, could you print out a copy of that? What's up on the website, please? Yeah, sorry. Or 2, maybe? Thank you. Jeez.
While that's happening, does anybody have any questions? We talked about this, I think, once before, or at least once or twice before, as Peter mentioned. And we've got Willie here from the French school, who I'm sure is happy to answer questions if we have any for him. Yeah, Councilor Fournier?
My only questions, I think you plan to be here for quite some time?
Yeah.
That's what we like to hear. Okay.
Councilor Pillsbury?
I know when we talked the last time, accreditation was an issue for the lease term. Does that pose a problem to you now with the revised terms?
Willie, could you podium, please? Yeah.
No, the revised term is not an issue at all. What was the issue I tried to stress was a calendar, which was unfortunate. So the revised term that we just did a change to 2 terms is perfectly fine.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yep. So just for the benefit of the public while we're waiting for the printout, I've said before, I'm a big fan of the French school. They're a great asset to have in town. I know it's been a draw for people to, to come to Freeport because we have that. So thank you for doing that. And thanks to all your staff who's been working for, I can't remember the number of years, but I know it's been at least 15, 16, because my kids have been there that long ago. So what we've got is a 20-year lease with a 20-year extension to keep you in the Soul School in South Freeport, which I think is a great idea. Did you guys here at the council, do you want to wait for that printout before we move forward with it, or have you seen it and looked at it and comfortable with it and ready to vote on it? See some nodding heads.
Well, I don't think Ed's seen it, though, so.
Yeah, I mean, I have no problem with the lease, I don't think, so I would vote for it, but I haven't seen it, so it feels.
Ed, you know what? I sent a red line version via email.
To my town account, which is why I didn't see
It just struck me, yep. Ed's been having lockout problems that we've been trying to help him with, so.
I would abstain for that reason, but I do support the effort. Well, for something I haven't seen. And I appreciate having it now, but I won't read it before you vote, so.
Yep, understood.
Thank you.
Sorry.
I assume tabling it for the end of the meeting doesn't help. Yeah, okay.
You can have the copy that you didn't vote on, Ed, so at least to take with you.
Yeah, I'll read it tonight.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, just to note on page 2, the amount there is not the correct amount. The correct amount is $17,825.04, I think is what we're
Correct.
starting with, is right.
The starting term would be the current, this year's rent.
2022.
Not last calendar year's rent, correct. Yep.
Okay. Awesome. So with that, let's take a vote on the lease. Let's do a roll call since I know it's not going to be unanimous. Councilor Pillsbury?
In favor.
Councilor Fournier?
Yes.
Councilor Lawrence?
Yes.
Councilor Bradley?
Abstain?
Councilor Egan?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes as well. So let's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yeas, 1 abstention, and 1 absent.
We'll talk soon, Willie. We'll get things signed.
Thank you very much for your support.
Thank you once again. I'm sure you're glad to not have to come to our meetings anymore. We won't take it personally. I think so. Clearly, not a lot of other people do.
Is this like France, or is it different?
It's kind of the same idea. I always admire people who are willing to give up their evening to the benefit of the entire community. So, amazing.
What I learned from watching French politics when I was more involved with the school is that there's a lot more yelling and arguments and debates in French politics than there are here. We're pretty civil.
Yeah, and this.
I'm not asking. I should be careful what I say.
And on April 10, we have a presidential election, so it's getting pretty ugly in France right now.
Oh, is that all right?
Yeah.
I'm thinking of doing some British parliamentary, I'd like to do the Prime Minister's address and then the shadow government back and forth.
Yeah,
Maybe if we
so-
could do that at our next meeting. so.
Changes every meeting.
Let's stop coming up with revising our political system. But congratulations again, Willie. Great to have you.
Thank you. Right. Same here.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Our next item is item number 45-22 regarding the first of 2 requests to use some town property. This one by the Chamber of Commerce. Councilor Lawrence, would you read the be it ordered?
Sure. Be it ordered that a request for use of town property by the Freeport Chamber of Commerce be approved.
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Fournier. So this is a request by our one-time colleague, former Councilor Whitney, who is now running the Chamber of Commerce and breathing new life into said chamber. And one of the things that she has is a new event, which I think is called the Chocolate Festival, if I have it right. And they are running it at a number of places in town, one of which is the Town Hall lawn that they'd like to use, and they need our permission to use it. So that's what we have before us. There's a 2-page official request form for that, which would be on March 12th.
It's really pretty basic. Nope, I just told her they wanted to do a bounce house. I told her the only rule is no bounce houses because they're a high liability item in the wintertime with blow-offs and kids slipping and stuff, so. But there's going to be a small mini festival stop on their bus tour that's going to have a couple stops throughout town, so. Just using the physical space, everything else will be theirs.
So no alcohol, but yes chocolate.
But I did kill the bounce house idea, and I made her really sad, so.
Somebody has to do that. I'm glad it's you, not me. Any other discussion on using town property for a chocolate festival? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. That was easy. Our next item, 46-22, is a similar item. This one by Visit Freeport for Makers on Main, which is a summer-long festival that goes every Saturday for a variety of places along Main Street, including, once again, Town Hall, and also, in this case, Bartle Library, I think, another town property.
Is it every Saturday or every third Saturday?
It's once a month, first
May
Saturday. of the month.
7th, June 4th, July 2nd, August 6th, and September 3rd.
Right, from May through September.
So is that the first Saturday?
Yep. Looks like it, yep.
Yep. Yeah, that's at the top of the first page of the dates, if you're curious. And it's for 2 locations, Town Hall and Bartle Library.
This is actually the 3rd year. They did a really brief one at the end of 2020 as well, so it worked perfectly fine last summer. I'm happy to volunteer the space. No real interruptions and not a ton of wear and tear on the lawns either. I think we just mowed on the regular schedule and they used the lawns out front, so.
Yeah.
Worked
It's
out
been
pretty good.
really successful. I think a lot of.
Great event.
Yeah,
Yep.
a lot of people like it. I think we need to read this one in and get it on the table. So Councilor Bradley, would you read the be it ordered?
Yes. Be it ordered that the request of use of town property by the Visit Freeport be approved.
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Lawrence. Any other discussion on this one? Pretty straightforward. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It's unanimous as well. So that concludes the action items on our agenda. We're now to our other business items. We have 3 items. The first of which is sort of a continued discussion from our recent meeting about adding a zoning administrator position, which I'll let the town manager talk about.
So I think we've touched on this one briefly. I put a cover memo on there, but I think that's all things we've already talked about with the council. That was more for the general public. The back page of that, there are some, it's a start of a draft of a job duties, qualifications and job duties list. It's not exclusive, but this is the direction that we're going. The individual would, you notice that we, as I wrote it, we tailored it to working with property owners to resolve zoning issues that are discovered and only using enforcement mechanisms which go through my office and the town attorney is the last resort when things can't be resolved. Those resolution, as I call them in this non-enforcement resolution, would be things like passing an amendment that would make what you were doing on your property that's a violation no longer a violation if it's not a big deal. Like, you can't do XYZ on your property in zoning and you have a business that's been existing for 10 to 15 years. This would help that person say, hey, that's not really a big deal. Let's see if the planning board would make that an allowable use on the property. Non-enforcement resolution could also be making a change to a property to make it no longer non-conforming. That's a relatively easy change. They could work with the property owner to explore what some of those options are. It could be getting after the fact approval. A lot of times things are allowed on a property, but just they've never gone through the approval process. So going through that, leading the applicant through the application process, which might have to go through project review board, that might have to go through the zoning board for, potentially for a variance or something like that. And last but not least, a non-enforcement resolution could be in one of the instances where we think maybe something should be allowed by an exception, bringing it to the council as a consent agreement, something that's existed for a really long time that isn't detrimental to the community that maybe we want to allow. So those are all things that, as the council is aware, probably 5 of these items over the past 2 years have come up that have been real headaches that have come to the council, and it's like a juggling act with town staff and 10 people with their hands in the, myself, the town attorney, the town planner, the code enforcement officer, all trying to coordinate with somebody or somebody in their legal counsel, and it just turns into a giant game of back and forth instead of having one person that's delegated to work with that person through the resolution process. There might be 2 or 3 of these going on at once, so if you take that, that would be a full-time job in and of itself. My vision for what this job does when there aren't matters like that to resolve is that they work on a extensive backlog of ordinance amendments to our zoning ordinance and to some of our other ordinances that we keep asking the planning board and the town planner to work on. So I think that these are all things that need to get done that we don't have the bandwidth to do currently. So that's where the proposal's coming from.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a full-time position? And you're,
That's the intent, if we can find the right person who's available and they're want a full-time job. That's, the other part is that I don't want to give the impression that this will be hiring the first person that walks through the door. We really need to find someone who can do the job, who understands the regulations, which are complex, and who also is a good customer service, working with people kind of a person. So getting that person might not happen in a month, it might not happen in 3 months, but I'd like to start trying. And when we find the right person, obviously getting them to come here on a full-time basis.
and what are you looking for tonight from us? It's not an action, it's just a consensus?
Just the understanding that this is a full-time position, that, I guess I'm saying the same exact thing that we just talked about with FEDC. This is what has been identified as a priority by our planning and codes department to get things unstuck. A lot of things unstuck that are currently stuck or that have been stuck, that this would help that. Both our planner and our codes officer says these are things that they don't have the time to do, that often lead to people feeling like there's no one to help them, getting really frustrated, and, the town is telling me I'm breaking some rule but won't tell me how to fix it. Which is accurate. I mean, we don't have somebody who holds somebody's hand through this application, which can be intimidating if you're just a homeowner or a small business owner, so.
All right, Councilor Bradley first, and then Councilor Fournier.
Just a clarification, could you describe the difference between issuing non-land use NOVs and land use NOVs?
Sure. NOV is just a notice of violation, that there's a violation occurring on a piece of property. Land use being zoning or some of the other closely related ordinances like subdivision. So it would be, this person would have to be qualified to issue NOVs, but they would focus, initially, we'd want to split them between the technical things, which the code officer would continue to deal with, like.
Example?
What's that? Building code, life safety, fire, things like that, as opposed to shoreland zoning, a zoning violation, a use violation, a subdivision violation. That would be what the zoning administrator would focus on. They would have the ability to do either's jobs, but that's how we're envisioning the division of duties to happen initially. That could obviously be adjusted at any time with the right person and the right skill set. They would have to be certified as a code enforcement officer. Sorry, Council Fournier, go ahead.
That's fine. I'm definitely in favor of the position after what we've had for discussions, but I have 2 points.
Sure.
First point I'm wondering is, under the plan, under the new position, is it a possibility that they could have the responsibility of the sustainability coordinator? And what I'm thinking is, I envision that position of maybe writing different applications or whatever. I don't know. And I don't know if that's something that maybe we could kill 2 birds with 1 stone, but that's something you can research and find out. The second thing that I'd like to discuss is how And this is focusing on department heads, and this is focusing on workflow and coming through. I would like to see that reorganized to have one department head that would be in charge of planning, CO, and codes administration. Because I think your proposal you're set forth tonight would be adding another department head.
It wouldn't be adding a new department head, but it wouldn't be consolidating them, so that's half. It would be putting this underneath the planner, but your exact proposal is one that's already been brought to me by the code officer and the planner to consider moving forward.
I would strongly encourage having one department head with those responsibilities. I think it would give it greater flow. I think it would help on communications, and I think it would make that office a little more efficient. So, awesome, I'm glad they recommended
Well,
that.
Darrell, you're just batting 1,000 with staff tonight, so thank you. So
no,
Ed and Andrew are on the same page, and everyone's on the same page tonight, so what do you?
Oh, wow.
The kind of council we like to see.
It's definitely on the table. It's this won't do that, but that's a couple strokes to the pen that I can bring to the council for approval at a later date when we get the right people in place and if everything's working. So keep it on your back burner and remind me of it in a couple of months when we get this person in, and we'll work on that.
Thank you.
Any other comments on zoning administrator?
I'm just glad to see action. We've been talking about these issues and these dynamics and how swamped and buried the various staff are at Planning and Codes Department. So I'm very happy to see it happen. Hope we can find a good candidate.
Darren?
I just, from what I understood, Peter, that the resources possibly to fund this position was already in the funds that were generated through permits. I would, if it was up to me, I'd say, get this done, get it advertised, and let's get moving, sooner the better. So
Yeah,
I'm not
that's-
sure if there's that support here, but I certainly would like to encourage that.
What I'm hearing tonight, that's what my plan is to get this advertised and see if we can find somebody. Whether or not we need to do some action from the council to get supplemental funding, if it happens in the next 3 months, we may need to come back for a little bit of money, we may not, depending on what the budgets look like. So you may see something from me along with the budget, a supplemental appropriation for a small amount into that. But the revenue is there in excess. I'm always very careful about how I say this. It's not fair to say there's no tax impact. It would not raise the current tax rate because there is excess revenue in the codes office coming in. If we weren't to use that to fund a position, that money would go to the general fund. It would reduce taxes. What really should happen is if there's excess revenue coming into codes, that legally the code application fees should be reviewed by the council and should be reduced by that amount because we're not actually incurring those costs to review plans. If the code office is making $100,000 more than its personnel costs per year, I'm not going in that direction because I think we need these resources here, but I'm just trying to say, I don't think that would return $100,000, say, to the general fund. I think that the recommendation from staff would be to reduce permit fees, because that's legally what we should do if we weren't going to spend the money on a position.
Councilor Bradley?
Yeah, I'd just like to reiterate what was said earlier. I mean, it was only a meeting ago that we identified this issue as a priority for the council. I want to congratulate the manager in bringing this forward so quickly and so consistently with what he heard from the council. And I'd like to see you do just what you said you'd do. Do it right away and let's get going. I mean, we don't have to wait for visioning to know this needs to be done.
Well, this was identified as a priority by everybody up here, so I figured if I wanted to keep having 7 friends to my left, I should probably do it. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Peter. It looks like you've got nodding heads here, so.
We do have actually somebody with the hand up in the audience, which I did not see. Ms. Vayu, on this item, should I?
Yeah, please, Joyce, share your thoughts with us.
Sorry, Joyce, I hope I haven't been ignoring you too long here.
Oh, I only raised it about 7 times. I have to, what Darrell said, though, about adding a statement in there about him being the person being the sustainment coordinator. I heard that term several times during the Design Vision Week and how there's federal funds available if you have somebody with this magic title. So if we could I don't know if it's right for that person, but if we could look at including that in somebody's job description so that we do qualify. And I'd also look at whoever that person is, that they have the grant writing experience, because I think there's a lot of grants out there for the type of things that we want to do with the revisioning of downtown that we need to try to tap into, and that's quite a skill. So I would suggest we look at that also. Thank you for letting me talk again.
The sustainability folks who've been talking about that coordinator have mentioned on several occasions that grant writing is something that they would expect that person to do, and that they do expect there are significant funds out there. So I would definitely like to see that. Which is sort of a good segue into our next item, which regards funds, federal funding. So this is, we talked a couple of times about ARPA funding that has been released to us, and we'll get another chunk next year, total of $900,000. We've spent about $150,000, so we still have $750,000, more or less, which can be spent according to the rules. The rules, oversimplifying, I think they allow for spending on things like infrastructure, including water, sewer, broadband's included in that. They also talk about affordable housing. They talk about hazard pay, which we've already addressed to some degree. And they also talk about lost revenue because of the pandemic. And I see the manager running away, but I'll share some thoughts that, based on some discussions I've had with some of you already. One of the things I'd like to propose is that when we ask for requests for this funding, so we're going to ask for people to say, hey, I have a project that I'd like to use this funding for. I'd like to see big projects. I don't want to see $50,000, $10,000 projects before us. I want to see a small number of very large projects that have a meaningful impact, because we don't often get the chance to allocate this amount of money in one chunk, so I'd like to take advantage of that. So I don't know exactly what those are, but what I would propose is that we put out a call for requests with some guidelines saying these are the size of projects we'd like to see, these are the areas that we want to focus on, and then allow for a month or so for requests to come in, and then we evaluate. Councilor Bradley.
Yeah, Dan, I'd like to respond to that. The size of a project doesn't necessarily determine its significance to the community. And I'm aware of a couple smaller projects, by your definition, that are critical to organizations that are just getting their feet on the ground. So maybe if we could have two categories, a small amount of money for small grant requests, say you take $50,000 of this and say this will consider operational grant requests for a limited period of time, and within the $50,000 use the rest of the money for your big grants, so that we don't knock out of the box some of these organizations that are struggling to get going and are consistent with our downtown revisioning process.
Keep in mind that we need to meet the guidelines set by Treasury.
I always know that they're out there.
Does that include things like bike paths and that kind of stuff?
I don't know what it includes. I
know. That's what I'm asking.
Oh, I don't know.
I mean, because we have this huge, the bridge projects going in, and we've got to build entranceways to it, and that's going to be expensive. And if we can use it for that, that would be huge. And the Greenway, connecting it all. I mean, that goes right to downtown visioning and.
Yeah. I know there's another bucket of money that came up at, I think it was the workshop we had last week, wasn't it? That's a brand new grant program by DOT. I want to say it's the Village Improvement Program or something similar to that, which was specifically for slowing down Main Street. So that was a separate pot of money. But to answer your question, I don't know what the rules are about what's allowable, what's not. But Peter might have some input. But Councilor Pillsbury.
Is this an opportunity? Because we do have some time. I agree that we do want to move as quickly as possible. is this an opportunity to get some technical assistance? I know a lot of municipalities are struggling with how to use these funds. Some of them are getting put to good use, some maybe not. Is there an opportunity for us to entertain some organization they could come in and give us some recommendations, not necessarily say, you need to do this, this, and this, but if you focus on this type of project, this is kind of the return you're going to see, this is the benefit, just to give us a little bit more of a benchmark, because I also think that as we get the proposals, we're going to need some sort of metric for reviewing, grading, ranking, and figuring out what's going to be most beneficial to the town. And to me, right now, if I had to start looking at it, it would just be, gut feeling as to, oh, I think that's going to be impactful, but I'd really like to have some sort of process or something to hang my hat on this.
Councilor Fournier.
I guess I would go back to Peter, and my question is, are we up to date on our technology to transmit? Sometimes we struggle here on using technology. So is that because we don't have the proper infrastructure? Is that because we don't maybe have the proper equipment? Are we up to date? We talked about earlier that we want to be able to get out to our constituents in the town, and I think that's a great medium to do that. And then, being a department head here for many years, sometimes we go on the least inexpensive, and we find that sometimes that doesn't address what we are trying to address, and we end up doing it again. So I guess I would encourage, and I'm sure that the department heads and you, Peter, probably have some ideas that things that aren't working quite right that may fall in these categories, and I hope we take an opportunity to look at that also to see where we're at.
I mean, I think some of the connectivity stuff that is allowed by ARPA funding, that doesn't really apply to the town. We've got some good connectivity. We've got good throughput, fiber serving all of our buildings, things like that. I think some of the town-wide things, that's a different matter completely. Like, is there a town role to play in securing, or is there a nonprofit role to securing broadband for businesses and the general public? That's something that's been batted around by a lot of municipalities. In terms of the way things work, difficulty with technology is probably just because we've got too many. It's getting difficult to manage 5 different channels going through one brain and working at the same time. So you've got, Tom in the control room and another person. We've gone from doing live here to cable and that's it, to in the span of, 6 months going live to 15 different streaming services that all need to be set up their own way. And, we got Zoom people coming in. We're going out to Zoom. It's great. It's amazing. It's fun. It's fun to see it all come together for governmental purposes, but I think we just need to get better in dealing with and managing all the different inputs. I don't know about ARPA projects that would fall under that boat, though, but maybe somebody's more creative than me. I don't mind putting it out for department heads to look at, like what Daryl said.
And by the way, Tom, thank you to you and the other men behind the curtain for this new Zoom setup. It's awesome. It's great to have the back and forth dialogue on Zoom. It's working well.
Now it's working with the volume, and we got the echo gone, and so it's constantly improving.
Peter, was my description at a high level accurate about
100%,
the funding or the allowable uses for ARPA funding? Okay, anything to add there?
No, I think that those are the high level uses. We did some premium pay already. We talked about previously, I do want to say that we talked previously about premium pay for non-first responders, and some of that would be allowable, but the Treasury has issued more concrete guidance that it would not be universal to all employees. You would have to give justification that they were frontline employees throughout the pandemic and that they actually worked in place and that they didn't work remotely, that they were contacting the public, things like that. So there are some other town employees that may qualify for that, but it's definitely not an across the board. I wouldn't qualify for it. None of the back office people would qualify for it. Some of our counter service people may, so that might be on the table for consideration. that's just something that's in the back of my head. I would expect to apply if that was a proposal, that I had to put that in for consideration with all these other projects, though. So that's what I was thinking based on the conversation that just happened.
Councilor Fournier and then Councilor Egan.
After you administered to the public safety people that particular project, what's the feedback been? Have you had feedback from other positions in here? Because it was interesting after hearing the discussion of how some of the hours were changed and some of the staffing models were changed and everything. I thought it was done properly. It didn't have as much of an impact on those other positions.
No,
And-
I didn't get any negative feedback. I'm sure people would love to get a bonus, as everybody would. So I don't want to say like everyone was happy they didn't get a bonus. I mean, but at the same time, we've done a heck of a lot in terms of being flexible in all of our departments throughout this, trying to adjust, and for public safety as well. But I think we do have to recognize that a lot of those positions didn't have the option for flexibility. So, I guess I'll say I haven't heard complaints. There may be grumbles. I would never assume that everyone's happy for not receiving something. But there have not been outright complaints, which I assume, I did get inquiries from public safety people saying, hey, everybody, these other towns and cities are doing public safety hazard pay. Are you considering that for us? Haven't we done the same thing that some of these other towns and cities are doing? And I said, yeah, you have. I mean, so.
John?
I might suggest that on an ad hoc basis, maybe you ask 3 counselors to work on an outline for potentially, the next meeting, and that we consider, I like Matt's idea a lot, of getting some technical assistance, and I think GPCOG would be at the top of that list, because they're handling this type of work and this scope of work for a number of other different venues. So it very well might be that we don't even have to engage with them. We could probably just get some of that advice, or if we did have to, it would be a very, very limited, small-scale engagement to get some advice on suggestions that we might bring forward. Then I think it would be a lot easier for the 7 of us to respond to something that's in front of us. And we've kind of popcorned a number of ideas here, but I think to move it forward and not have it just kind of amorphous for a while, that maybe, 3 of us could put something together and bring back, and then we can tear it apart and start over again and go back to the board, or we can, get some advice and some input from GPCOG and see what they have to say.
Yeah. I like that idea. Thanks for
Try to move
suggesting
that
that. I
along.
think it's a great idea, yeah. Can I infer that by offering the suggestion that you'd want to put your hand up to be one of those 3?
I could do that.
And Matt, I know we've talked about that as well, and I'm guessing Ed sounds like he's got interest, but if anybody else wants to join that,
I would, but I don't have time, so.
yeah.
Fortunately.
So, Matt, Ed, John, does that sound like a good group to get started? Are we comfortable with that? And at the next meeting, or maybe a few meetings from now, 2 meetings from now, if you guys want to suggest something, that would be great. Something to react to. I like that. Thanks again, John.
The ARPA funding criteria are printed somewhere?
Peter, you have access to those. It's huge, right? They're like 200 pages.
Yeah,
but
it's extensive. We can.
maybe you can help summarize it for the group.
Yep.
For those
Now?
3. No.
Okay, yeah.
Not now.
No, I'd like to see that too. I mean, once you summarize it, I'd like to see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's, Jessica Malloy had access to a good, I think it was a GFOA, which is her professional association summary, a couple summary
Great.
bullet lists that, and then it all links back to the Treasury documents, the Department of the Treasury documents that are the, it's like the IRS backup for doing your taxes, like hundreds of
Yeah,
pages.
yeah. Yeah, I've tried to keep up, but I can't. It's too much of it. All right. Cool. Thank you for offering to do that. Or offering, or being volunteered anyway. Last item on our agenda at 8:23 is discussion of victuals license changes and amendments. And I know Jake was keen on talking about this, but he's not here, but I think we all know where he stands. Peter, do you want to give an update on what you, I think you were going to research this and.
I do,
have found
yeah.
some
I'm
things.
gonna just do a run through here if I can. The technology will work. Oh, look at that. For the first time all night. I look like I know what I'm doing. too big. Look at that. Okay, so I just want to step through this. This is a pretty short document. And this is our victualers licensing ordinance. Had a lot of discussion with town staff. We do think there is marginal at best to no value to this ordinance, and that it is a stumbling block. It's a pain in the rear for town employees to do every year. It's a pain for local businesses to do every year. And it doesn't provide, well, I'll get to it. It provides minimal to no benefit that we don't already have in our other ordinances. I'll explain what I mean by that. It's all in the purpose. The purpose is to ensure that establishments serving food or drink intended for consumption by the public prepare their food or drink in a safe and sanitary environment. I would hold that that is actually the purpose of the state food licensing requirements, and that this ordinance does nothing other than checking that somebody's received a state food license. And if you don't have a state food license, and we find out you don't have a state food license through the victualer's license process, all we do is call the state health inspector and say, hey, they don't have a food license. So we're not actually doing anything. We're just checking state licenses, which we could do regardless. Anybody could do it. A resident could do it. Anybody, the town could easily do it and get a list of all of them. I've already talked with the town clerk about every 6 months or something and posting it so people could see. We could do any internal process that would accomplish the same thing. I go through what some of the specifics here are. Let's go issuance and denial of a license. This is your criteria on why you approve or don't approve a license. 1, if the applicant fails any part of a state inspection or a local health inspection. We don't have state local health inspections. So if you fail your state inspection, you can't serve food. So you don't need a victualer's license to prevent somebody from serving food if you fail a state inspection. Number 2, I'll let people who are more knowledgeable than me comment on that in terms of a social justice, a potential racial justice perspective, but I think that that might be something that would have some undertones. If the applicant is not of good moral character, in determining good moral character, the town council shall consider all evidence presented, but shall in addition check the applicant's police record, if any. I would say that that leads to the potential, or maybe not as likely today, but at some points in the history of this ordinance may have led to the potential for abuse, for somebody to say they're not of good moral character to anybody that they think is undesirable. I'll just leave that as that. I don't think that has a place necessarily in our ordinances. I think that social media does this function today anyways. When somebody opens a business, I mean, this is almost, the market almost controls who does business where and who goes where, and oh, that person is an unsavory business, we're not going to go there. It seems to me that there's a lot more information out there than there was 30 or 40 years ago when this was written, when it was the responsibility of the town to find out whether somebody was a good person or not. Oftentimes, other people bring that information to us now. We're not the ones that are finding that information. So I've got concern, not that there's anything overtly wrong here, but just that language is, conviction of a crime is not a bad thing, but the top part where it says, in determining good moral character, the town council shall consider all evidence presented. I don't think that that's good language to have in any town ordinance. So if you want to keep the victualer's license, I'd like to get rid of that part alone. Failure to pay an outstanding fine, penalty, or tax owed to the town by the individual, corporation, or we have abilities to collect that money already. If you don't pay your taxes, we have a tax lien process. We lien the property and we collect it. This is the only time that I've seen this used in the past 10 years that I've been here is for this provision right here, using it to try to twist someone's arm into paying a tax 6 months ahead of when they would have had to pay it for property foreclosure anyways. It achieves little to nothing in this regards to forcing people to pay fines or taxes. Councilor Fournier.
I'm going to bring up a lot of history, and across the street here, there used to be a seafood restaurant. I think it was Elder McLeod, I believe, was the owner. We had a dispute on the line of the sidewalk. And that ended up going to the Supreme Court, and this was used one time in the victualer's license to try to hold that up now. Whether it's right or wrong, who knows, but.
I've heard rumors of that.
That was an interesting exercise.
So I would just posit that we have the ability to collect any amounts that are due to us anyways without needing a victualer's license as a tool to twist somebody's arm. We have those legal methods already available to us. Requirements and conditions, this is the only
redeeming value of this ordinance that I can see here. The municipal officers may place conditions and requirements on the license. These conditions and requirements must be reasonably designed to promote the health, safety, or welfare of the public. I would hold that we have the ability to do a lot of this anyways, specifically measures designed to reduce noise, opening and closing times. I don't know if we want to be telling restaurants when they should be opened and closed. I thought that was something that the businesses should probably determine on their own. That seems a little bit overreaching to me. Measures designed to reduce noise.
We have a noise ordinance.
We have a noise ordinance, thank you. And also we have a special amusement ordinance which governs things generating noise like music, dancing, and parties, which the only time in 10 years that I've been here I've seen that actually used is for a outdoor party. It was the Gritty Summer Party, and we had a complaint that they had generated too much noise, so the council at the time put some restrictions or asked them to work with the abutting property owner. It was not under the victualer's license. It was under the special amusement permit process, which we're proposing. That one might be on the chopping block in the near future, but that's not what we're talking about here tonight. So what it does do, fees, new or renewal, $135. So the town gets $135 from every restaurant. I would hold that we spend more than $135 in staff time for each one of these, following up on them, and that Chris Wolf and Chris's office and people down here in the Planning and Codes office could have their time better utilized than chasing around food licenses here. So those are really, that's it. There's a lot more details in here how it works, but those are the key points. I think eliminating this ordinance is minor. It's not going to save the world. It's one little step, but the council asked to look at some ordinances that we could eliminate and have an analysis done. I don't see that this has much redeeming value to the town other than being a pain to people who apply and the town staff, that it's essentially redundant with all of our other rules and regulations and creates another layer here. Councilor Bradley.
Yeah, Peter, what other ordinances do we have that do relate to sanitation and public health and safety and the sale of food?
So we don't do public health inspections. The only, for food licensing, only a few of the larger cities in Maine do those, and actually the state has taken over all. Everybody our size is handled by the state. I think there might be 5 or maybe 10 at tops of cities in Maine that do their own public health food inspection. The state would not, I don't believe the state would let us do it right now if we asked. I think that there's a state inspection process and that is set by law.
I mean, I guess what I'm thinking is, we're not just podunk. I mean, we have millions of people go through our town, and we are hoping to encourage a lot of people to eat here, and we're talking about food courts and food trucks and peddlers carts and all of that stuff. And I would guess myself that the state inspector shows up here, once every blue moon. I don't know that, but I don't know.
He shows up pretty regular.
Does he?
They're active. Joel,
Yeah.
we know he's on a first name basis with
Can I
town
ask,
staff.
do we know and are comfortable that the state inspection of food sanitation is sufficient for our town?
Yes, I would. Darrell probably, when he was fire chief, worked with the state inspector more than I did.
The process was, and I'm not sure if it has changed or not, Ed, but we inspect every facility, retail in the store at least once a year, unless there was a complaint. That includes going into kitchens. We have to go in, when we go into a kitchen, we check the hood systems, we check the gas systems to make sure they shut off in the event of a fire. And I have had my inspectors on occasion come back to me and say, we got a problem down here because we get X. At that point, that would generate a call to the state, and I would say that during my tenure as chief, the state was very responsive and would come down and address it. So I think there's a process in place. I'm assuming they're still doing the inspections. Peter could answer that. So I think we're in good shape on that.
I've seen them have same-day responses to complaints. That's all that I know from firsthand experience. I know everyone's on first-name basis with our local food inspector. Chris, you deal with them a little bit, but I know that you think that they're fairly responsive to town inquiries, right? Sorry, you don't have a microphone, do you? I shouldn't have asked you that.
Yeah, so Joel does do an annual inspection each year, and I talked with him on the phone, and as far as getting a list of businesses that have their current state food licenses on a quarterly basis is going to be a very simple thing. So we can monitor to make sure that businesses in town are maintaining a current state food license. That's going to be super easy for us to do. It's going to be easier for us to do that than do all this vitrilar licensing.
And I would just say that if we want to enforce anything in here, it's got to come to the town council to deal with in a public hearing process to revoke somebody's license before we can shut their business down, as opposed to just calling Joel, who can send somebody over, say your food license is
Himself.
revoked. Well,
He's
he would
our
come himself,
inspector. He's
correct.
our local inspector. He does everything himself.
They would do it
Yeah.
same day,
Yeah.
as opposed to 2 weeks later, we have the town council having a public hearing about whether we should shut somebody's victualer's license down.
Correct.
So I guess I'm hearing that the state will fill the responsibility that this ordinance would have in terms of issuing a license and making sure that at the beginning of every year, the business is up to snuff.
So
They have to do
DHHS is in charge of food safety. So when he goes in, his eye is on making sure that food is safely served from any commercial kitchen.
He being who?
Joel Demers, our local health inspector.
How
from the
often is
Department
he?
of Health and
Is he in
Human
town
Services.
every day, every week, every month?
So I can't answer for that, Ed.
Yep.
It's something I could find out, but
They inspect
they
yearly,
inspect annually.
every
If-
establishment.
If it turns out that the state does the job that we would want done so that our community doesn't get the reputation of having unsafe food, which would be terrible for this town, right? I'll shut up. But if there's any question about the scope of coverage and then there being, a need in town to have an ability to bring someone to task, if you take this ordinance out, we've got nothing, right? You don't have an ordinance that says the town shall bring a fine or take action with respect to public health and safety for food delivery or sanitation. You're leaving it all to the state if you take this away?
Correct.
So maybe the thing to do is just have a short ordinance, not this whole thing that says a whole license thing, but have an ordinance which says something like it shall be a violation of the town of Freeport ordinances to serve food or the public in an unsanitary way, period. That way, if you hear about something, the guy isn't around, and you want to take some action, you can either call him or you can bring an action on your own through your code enforcement officer. You have the standing in your own ordinance to do something on your own if you need to. It's a backup.
I don't know if we legally have the ability to do food inspections.
Why not? You're doing them already.
No, we don't.
No, we don't.
They're just checking
Yeah.
the license. They're just checking to make sure
State-
they've got a license.
Well, what are all those ordinance provisions that say, I don't mean to argue, but it looks like,
Yeah.
to me, that you've got a whole range of,
It does look that way, doesn't it?
well, you may not do it, but you have the authority to do it if you
I
want to.
don't think we do.
It's in your ordinance. You mean your ordinance is unconstitutional?
When I say that state law, that there are a handful of larger cities that have the ability to do their own food inspections that are granted that ability by the state handles everybody else in the state, and I think, I would have to do some
Licensing.
research. What's that?
For licensing.
And
And
inspections.
inspections.
Well, I'd be just stunned if the code enforcement officer found that a food cart was serving old clams in a stew of slop, that we couldn't go to them and say, stop.
Well, I think if his gas fitting was incorrect, maybe we could, but I don't know if we could,
I
I
don't
don't know
know
if we
either.
could turn him off for having spoiled
Maybe
clams, though.
I'm off base. If we don't have the authority to do it, then we don't even have to argue about this. We just throw it out. If we do have the authority to do it, I think there's a basis in wisdom to hold it in reserve in case you need it. And you don't have to have a whole ordinance section which requires Chris to check all the licenses and everything, get rid of all the administrative process, but keep, the teeth somewhere buried in your sheath. That's all I'm saying.
And I think Ed is right on the money there, just to have the teeth on that. A couple times over my 40 years, we had a situation where I had to shut down a filling station because gasoline was leaking into the facility. So we were able to do that. That was through the fire. I'm not sure
Yeah,
on
so-
your point, Ed, through the food.
I don't
So
know.
I think you make a valid point.
So I do want to point out that there is, the reference to the life safety stuff is not in this ordinance. We have that ability anyways. The fire chief or the code officer can enter any establishment at any time on complaint or on suspicion and order any corrective action to be taken that needs to be taken for life safety. That does not apply to HHS regulated food service stuff. You know what I'll do some research. I'll find out before I sit up here and say, this is pie in the sky thinking tonight anyways. I didn't, we're not looking for any action tonight. This is great discussion. We want to hear all the thoughts on all sides before we go forward with actually putting a proposal out. If we have the ability to do local health inspections in terms of food safety, then maybe we need to think about exactly what Ed's saying about how you put that into an ordinance, or at least have something in our back pocket so it's available. I can tell you that we've never done it here from a food safety perspective. So,
Okay.
But I don't want to. The intent here isn't to hamstring the town. If that's out there, I don't want to take away an emergency provision that maybe we might need it. So
this might be part of your research, but maybe you have the answer at the tip of your fingers. Could we call up the state inspector and say, Peter's restaurant has rats and bad clams?
Same day.
And he would come and inspect
Same
it.
day.
And he has the authority to shut it down if he finds.
And they are responsive.
Say, oh, yes, yeah.
Well, then my
So-
point may not be very
So
valid.
I would reference, when, this is a touchy subject, but when the COVID-19 emergency orders came out in spring of 2020, when the governor ordered, there was a closure and then there was a reopening, they were going around individually to restaurants throughout the entire state, checking same day. So people would call us. There's a restaurant open and they're allowing people to dine indoors. We say, hey, we're not enforcing that. Here's DHHS's number. They would be there from our visual within an hour or two. We're getting a call to places. So from what I had heard from some of my other counterparts, it's same day at the latest, depending if they had to travel, halfway across the state or something. So that's the most recent experience that I've had in having somebody react quickly. I do know that they respond to food safety concerns they're pretty conscientious. It's not a, sleep on it department from what I know, so.
Before we go to Daryl, let me just clarify process. So what you're looking for tonight is just consensus that if you did go forward, bring a proposal likely to get rid of the victualer's license, that it would be likely for us to consider it and pass it. And if you know we're not going to do it, then you won't bother submitting the proposal.
I just want to
That's
get,
what
I want to get idea. Jake and I had a lot of conversation about how far we should go with removing fees or eliminating the ordinance completely. And I think I was probably more on the extreme end of eliminating it completely. And Councilor Daniele was, in the middle ground of we need to make this easier for food trucks and not have the supply and things like that. So I just floated out here to see what the thoughts are. Ed's got good points. Daryl's got good points. I think everybody's got some things we need to take into account, so.
My question, Peter, is how responsive is the state on weekends or holidays?
It's a good question that I
So
can't answer
I think by
firsthand.
having Ed's idea,
Yep.
that would solve a 4th of July, we have a bunch of food carts or whatever comes in a restaurant, they get some bad seafood in, you can take action, you can have public safety done at that point. Other than that, I think the ordinance ought to go away because it was a big pain for a lot of reasons, a lot of years, so.
But we couldn't do that anyway with the ordinance. We'd have to have that come before town council to
No,
to revoke it? Or can we?
I think you can have an emergency under the ordinance where public safety is in jeopardy, which could be a food-related item, and give the authority to code enforcement or?
There's overlap between local health officer, code enforcement officer, but the food safety inspection
So
part of it
standalone.
is state specific, but I need to find out, I need to answer Ed's question, which is it delegated responsibility and we cannot be delegated the responsibility, or is it delegated responsibility that we could apply for, in which case it doesn't really matter because we're not going to apply for it because we don't have the staff here? Or can we just do it at will? And if we can just do it at will, I think Ed's point is good. We don't just want to give that up.
So can you just make sure to talk to Jake before
Absolutely.
you come back? Because I know he's got thoughts on it too. But it sounds like it's worth considering a proposal anyway. We've got a few lingering questions, but.
We put it on our list.
Yeah, we should put it on our list. Chris, would you mind adding that as, it looks like it's item number 14 about discussing a proposal to remove the victualer's license? And we can have Peter follow up on that. All right. Any other items that you want to discuss?
Can I discuss adjournment?
You can discuss adjournment. Would you like to propose something?
Cut anybody off. I move we adjourn.
Anybody else want to do that?
Second.
Thank you, Counselor Lawrence. All in favor? And
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned at 8:44.
Like it. I see what happens when you don't say it's gonna be a short meeting?
I know. Say it. Don't say it. And it is.
Hey, which clock is right?
Was everyone in favor of that?
Yes.
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 Ed, are you not getting email on your council email?
I'm getting cut off from for some reason, I can't get into the town.
Sure.
Sometimes I get it through my personal email.
Yeah.
Somebody tries to reach
I already got a little bit of feedback, but just on